I'm Susan, 57, and I've dedicated my entire life to my daughter Alison. As a high school counselor, I've guided countless teenagers, but my greatest pride was watching my own daughter graduate with honors today, at least until she turned to me after receiving her diploma and said those words I'll never forget. Proud you raised me. I spent my whole life wishing anyone else had, just not you. I set the flowers down and walked out. That was only the beginning. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and please hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from someone you love. The day I found out I was pregnant with Alison was both the most terrifying and most wonderful day of my life. I was 19, halfway through my sophomore year of college, and completely unprepared. My boyfriend Mark vanished the moment I showed him the pregnancy test, and my parents made it clear they wouldn't be supporting my decision to keep the baby. I dropped out of college that semester. It wasn't what I wanted, but I needed to work full-time to prepare for Alison's arrival. I took a job waiting tables during the day and stocking shelves at night. My tiny studio apartment barely fit a crib, but I made it work. When Alison was born, she had these bright blue eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. She was alert and curious from day one, and I promised her that no matter what it took, I would give her the life she deserved. Those early years were a blur of exhaustion and joy. I worked constantly, sometimes taking Alison with me to my evening job when childcare fell through. My manager would let her sleep on a makeshift bed of blankets in the break room while I restocked shelves. It wasn't ideal, but we survived. By the time Alison started school, I had saved enough to rent a small two-bedroom apartment. It wasn't in the best neighborhood, but it was a step up. Alison's intelligence was obvious from the start. Her kindergarten teacher called me in to say that my daughter was reading at a third-grade level already. That's when I made the difficult decision to move us to Oak Ridge, a suburb with excellent public schools. The rent took nearly 70% of my income, but Alison's education was worth every penny of struggle. I took on extra weekend work, cleaning houses to make ends meet. When Alison was 10, I finally caught a break. I'd been taking night classes toward an associate's degree, and I landed a job as an administrative assistant at Oak Ridge High School. The pay wasn't great, but it came with stability and benefits. Most importantly, it put me on a career path where I could help others. Over the next few years, I worked my way up to become a guidance counselor assistant and eventually a full counselor after completing additional certification. I loved helping students navigate the challenges of adolescence and planning for their futures. Every day I would come home and share stories with Alison about the kids I helped, always careful to keep details private. Our little home became cozy over the years. We didn't have fancy furniture or the latest gadgets, but we had bookshelves overflowing with books, a small garden on our patio, and walls covered with Alison's academic achievements. Every certificate, every award, every perfect report card went up on what I jokingly called our wall of fame. Alison seemed to appreciate it when she was younger, proudly showing visitors her accomplishments. As Alison entered high school, her academic brilliance only intensified. She was taking all advanced placement classes, serving as editor of the school newspaper, and participating in debate club. College recruiters started sending materials before she even began her junior year. I couldn't have been prouder. I started noticing small changes during Alison's senior year. She became more distant, spending less time at home, and more time with her new friends. She'd always been somewhat reserved, but now she barely shared anything about her day. When I asked about college applications, she gave vague answers or changed the subject. I dismissed these warning signs as normal teenage behavior. After all, I counseled dozens of teenagers who were pulling away from their parents as they prepared to leave the nest. It was part of growing up, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. As graduation approached, Alison became increasingly secretive about her college plans. She wouldn't let me see her acceptance letters saying she wanted to surprise me. I respected her privacy, assuming she wanted to create a special moment for us. I took on extra counseling sessions after hours to save money for a graduation gift. I wanted to buy Alison a new laptop for college, something reliable that would last her 4 years. It stretched my budget to the breaking point, but seeing her face when she opened it would be worth it. The morning of graduation day seemed perfect. I made Alison's favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup, a luxury we usually reserved for birthdays. She seemed happy if a bit distracted. I attributed her nervousness to the speech she would give as one of the top students in her class. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," I told her as we prepared to leave for the ceremony. "Today is the culmination of all your hard work." She gave me a strange look, then one I couldn't quite interpret. If only I had known what that look meant. Oak Ridge High's football field had been transformed for graduation day. Rows of white chairs faced a stage decorated with the school colors of blue and gold. The May sunshine was bright, but not too hot, and a gentle breeze occasionally rustled the programs in people's hands. I arrived early to get a good seat, clutching a bouquet of sunflowers, Alison's favorites since childhood. Several parents recognized me from my work at the school and stopped to chat. I made polite conversation, but my eyes kept drifting to the rows of chairs where the graduates would soon sit. "Your daughter is graduating today, right, Susan?" asked Patricia Collins, mother of a junior I had been counseling. "You must be over the moon." "I am," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. 17 years of hard work has paid off. She's going to do amazing things. The ceremony began precisely at 10. The principal welcomed everyone, the school band played a slightly off-key rendition of Pomp and Circumstance, and the graduates filed in wearing identical blue caps and gowns. I spotted Alison immediately. Even from a distance, I could see her perfect posture, her head held high. Various speakers took the stage: the principal, the school board president, the valedictorian. I only half listened, too focused on my daughter, too busy imagining the bright future that lay ahead for her. I had sacrificed so much, but in this moment, it all seemed worth it. Finally, they began calling graduates to receive their diplomas. They moved through the A's and B's relatively quickly. When they reached Alison Carter, my heart swelled with pride. She walked gracefully across the stage, accepted her diploma, shook hands with the principal. And then she did something unexpected. Instead of continuing across the stage, she paused at the microphone. The principal looked surprised, but stepped aside. "I'd like to say something," Alison said, her voice carrying clearly across the field. "My mother is here today." She pointed directly at me, and hundreds of heads turned in my direction. I felt a moment of confusion, then pride. She was acknowledging me publicly. How sweet. But then she spoke the words that would replay in my mind for months to come. "Proud you raised me. I spent my whole life wishing anyone else had. Just not you." The crowd gasped. I sat frozen, the sunflowers trembling in my grasp. Surely I had misheard. But Alison's cold stare in my direction confirmed the truth. "For 18 years I've lived in embarrassment," she continued. "Today marks my freedom." She walked off the stage to scattered, awkward applause. People around me shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I felt their stares, their pity burning into me like hot coals. I couldn't breathe. The ceremony continued around me, names being called, applause rising and falling, but I heard nothing through the ringing in my ears. The woman next to me placed a hand on my arm, saying something I couldn't process. When I could finally move, I stood up on shaking legs. I walked down the row, mumbling apologies as I stepped past other parents. I left the sunflowers on my empty chair, a bright splash of yellow against the white plastic. The walk to my car felt endless. People stared. Someone called my name, but I didn't turn around. I fumbled with my keys, dropped them, picked them up with trembling fingers. Once inside my car, the dam broke. Sobs racked my body as I gripped the steering wheel. I couldn't drive in this state. But I couldn't stay here either, not with the ceremony letting out soon, not where everyone had witnessed my humiliation. 20 minutes later, I managed to compose myself enough to drive home. At a red light, I glanced at my phone and saw notifications flooding in. Alison had posted about the moment on social media. The post already had dozens of supportive comments from her friends praising her bravery and honesty. There was also a text from Alison. Staying with the Martins for a while. Don't wait up. The Martins. Jessica Martin was Alison's new friend this year. I'd met her parents briefly at a school function, polished, wealthy people with perfect smiles and designer clothes, the kind of people who had everything I couldn't give Alison. I barely remember the rest of the drive home. Walking into our empty apartment felt like entering a mausoleum. Alison's graduation cap and gown lay discarded on her bed. She must have come home while I sat crying in the parking lot. I sank down onto our worn sofa, the one I'd purchased second-hand when we first moved to Oak Ridge. The laptop I'd sacrificed to buy was still wrapped and hidden in my closet. All those extra hours worked for what? For a daughter who was ashamed of me. That first night alone was the worst. Rage, confusion, and heartbreak fought for dominance within me. I alternated between sobbing and screaming into pillows. I pulled out photo albums, flipping through images of a smiling Alison throughout the years. Had it all been an act? Had she always resented me? As dawn broke, I finally fell into an exhausted sleep on the couch, still wearing my proud mum dress, my face swollen from tears. 3 days passed with no word from Alison beyond that single text. I called in sick to work, unable to face my colleagues who had undoubtedly heard about the graduation disaster. How could I counsel students when my own daughter had publicly rejected me? On the 4th day, I forced myself to shower and clean the apartment. Moving on autopilot, I started picking up Alison's room, gathering laundry that had been left behind. As I straightened her desk, a leather-bound journal caught my eye. Alison had always been private about her writing, and I'd respected that boundary. But now I needed answers. I sat on the edge of her bed and opened the journal. The earliest entries were mundane teenage complaints, frustrations about homework, crush updates, friend drama. But as I flipped forward to entries from the past year, my stomach knotted. Had dinner at Tiffany's house again. Her mum made beef Wellington, and they have an actual dining room with candles and everything. Coming back to our apartment afterward was so depressing. September 15th. Mum tried to help me with my Yale application today, as if she has any idea what they're looking for. She never even finished college. It's embarrassing. October 29th. The Grants invited me to their lake house for spring break. I told Mum I was going to Jessica's to study. If she knew about the lake house, she'd make some comment about rich people and ruin it for me. I wish the Grants were my real family. March 3rd, the Grants, not the Martins, as she'd said in her text. How many families was my daughter pretending to belong to? I read entry after entry, each one driving the knife deeper. Alison had been systematically lying about her whereabouts for months. She'd been spending time with various wealthy families, apparently ashamed to bring friends to our modest apartment. The most recent entry, dated 2 days before graduation, made me physically ill. Everything is arranged. After graduation, I'm going to stay with the Grants until college starts. Mrs. Grant said they have a room just for me. Mum thinks I'm going to State University on scholarship, but I'm actually going to Yale. The Grants are helping with expenses that the scholarship doesn't cover. I haven't figured out how to tell Mum I don't want her to visit me at college. Maybe after tomorrow I won't have to worry about it. My hands shook as I closed the journal. My daughter had been planning to cut me out of her life. All those nights I'd stayed up worrying about college expenses, all those extra shifts I'd worked to help with her state school costs, and she'd been planning this betrayal all along. I called Alison immediately, my anger overriding my hurt. She answered on the fourth ring. What? Her voice was cold, distant. I found your journal, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I know everything, Alison. The lies, the grants, Yale. Silence stretched between us. You had no right to read my private journal, she finally said. And you had no right to humiliate me in front of the entire school, I shouted, my composure breaking. I gave up everything for you. My education, my youth. Any chance at a career I might have wanted. I worked myself to the bone to give you opportunities. Opportunities. Alison laughed bitterly. You gave me a life of embarrassment. Do you know what it's like to have a mother who's just a high school counselor? To live in that tiny apartment while my friends had real houses, to never go on vacations or have nice things. Each word was a slap. So all this time you've been, what, auditioning new families? Pretending the Grants are your parents? The Grants appreciate my potential. They see my worth. And I don't. My voice cracked. Everything I've done since the day you were born has been for you. I didn't ask to be born, Alison snapped. And I certainly didn't ask to be your charity project. Your look how I overcame being a teen mum success story. The phone call deteriorated from there. Alison refused to come home or have a real conversation. She ended the call, saying she would come by when I was at work to pick up more of her things. I sat in her room for hours afterward, surrounded by the debris of our life together. Photos, school projects, childhood stuffed animals, all carefully preserved by me, apparently meaningless to her. The full weight of her betrayal pressed down on me. My daughter hadn't just rejected me. She had been systematically planning her escape for months, maybe years. I had been living in the fantasy world of my creation, believing that our modest life was enough, that my love was enough. The reality was crushing. My daughter had been counting the days until she could trade me in for a better model. The weeks following graduation blurred together in a haze of depression. I took an extended leave from work, claiming a family emergency. It wasn't a lie. My family, my only family, had imploded. I barely ate. Sleep came in fitful bursts, often aided by the glass of wine that had become my nightly ritual. My phone remained silent. Alison had blocked me on social media, but mutual connections sent me concerned messages about posts she was making about her toxic childhood and her fresh start, with people who truly valued her. When I finally returned to work in mid-June, the halls of Oak Ridge High felt different. Emptier without students, yes, but also charged with an uncomfortable energy when I encountered colleagues. They'd all heard about what happened at graduation. Some avoided eye contact. Others were overly solicitous. Jennifer Davis, an English teacher I'd been friendly with for years, was the only one who addressed it directly. "Susan," she said, appearing in my office doorway on my first day back. "I've been worried about you." I gestured vaguely at the paperwork on my desk. "Just catching up. Summer planning, you know." Jennifer closed the door and sat down. "Cut the crap, Susan. I was at graduation. I saw what happened. How are you really?" The simple kindness of being asked broke something in me. I told Jennifer everything. The journal, the lies, the phone call. She listened without interrupting, occasionally reaching across the desk to squeeze my hand. "I keep asking myself what I did wrong," I concluded, wiping at tears. Was I really such a terrible mother? You were not, Jennifer said firmly. Allison is a smart girl, but she's also young and clearly shallow in ways none of us realized. This isn't about your parenting. This is about her values. I wanted to believe Jennifer, but doubt had taken root in my heart. For every memory of bedtime stories and homemade birthday cakes, there was now a shadow. Had Allison been comparing our life to others even then? Had she always been looking for an escape? The shame was perhaps the hardest part. Neighbours asked innocuous questions about Allison's summer plans, and I fumbled through vague answers. Colleagues wanted to know which college she had decided on, and I realized I didn't even know for certain if Yale was the truth or just another lie. My resentment grew alongside my shame. I had given up my youth, my education, my chances at a better paying career, all for a daughter who saw me as nothing but an embarrassment. I had worked 60-hour weeks to move us to a better school district, only for Allison to mock our apartment in her journal. All those years of sacrifice for what? So she could trade me in for the Grants with their lake house and beef Wellington. The confrontation at Wilson's Market was the lowest point. I was shopping for groceries, mechanically filling my cart with the same items I always bought when I saw them, Mrs. Grant pushing a cart while Allison chatted animatedly beside her. I froze in the cereal aisle, partly hidden behind a display. They hadn't seen me yet. Allison looked happy, happier than I'd seen her look around me in months. She was gesturing enthusiastically about something, and Mrs. Grant was nodding with a maternal smile. I should have left, should have abandoned my cart and walked out. But something kept me rooted to the spot, watching this woman effortlessly step into the role I'd been cast out of. Then I heard it. "Mom, do you think we could get these for the lake house this weekend?" Allison was holding up a box of fancy crackers. Mum. She was calling Rebecca Grant Mum. Before I could think, I was moving toward them. Allison. They both turned, startled. Allison's face immediately closed off, while Mrs. Grant looked uncomfortable, but maintained her polished smile. "Susan," she said with practiced warmth, "how nice to see you. Allison has been such a wonderful houseguest." "Houseguest," I repeated flatly. "Is that what she is? Because I just heard her call you Mom." Mrs. Grant's smile faltered. Allison stepped slightly in front of her as if to protect her. The gesture broke something in me. "How dare you!" I hissed, my voice too loud for the public setting. "How dare both of you! I raised her for 18 years by myself. I worked 3 jobs to put food on our table. I helped with every homework assignment, attended every school function. And you—" I turned to Mrs. Grant. "You swan in with your perfect house and your money and think you can just take over." "Mum, stop it," Allison said. And for a second, I thought she was talking to me, but her eyes were on Rebecca Grant. "This is exactly what I was talking about." Allison continued addressing Mrs. Grant, but loud enough for me to hear. "The emotional manipulation, the guilt trips about sacrificing for me. This is what I grew up with." People were staring now. A store employee was approaching cautiously. "Manipulation." I laughed, a harsh sound even to my own ears. "Is that what you call working myself to exhaustion so you could go to a good school? Skipping meals so you could have new clothes for the first day of classes?" Mrs. Grant placed a manicured hand on Allison's shoulder. "I think we should go, dear. Susan is clearly upset." "Upset doesn't begin to cover it," I snapped. "Did she tell you she was accepted to Yale? Did she mention that I found out from her journal? Not from her that she's been lying to me for months." The store manager had arrived now. "Ladies, I need to ask you to take this conversation outside." Mrs. Grant nodded politely. "Of course. We're just leaving." She steered Allison toward the front of the store, their abandoned cart sitting in the aisle. I stood there surrounded by curious onlookers, my face burning with humiliation. The manager asked if I was okay. I nodded automatically, then fled the store without my groceries. That night I researched apartments in other cities. I couldn't stay in Oak Ridge, not with the possibility of more encounters like that one. Maybe a fresh start somewhere else was the answer. Maybe I should just cut off Allison completely the way she had so easily cut me off. I fell asleep on the couch again. Empty wine glass on the coffee table, real estate listings on my laptop screen. The knock on my door came early on a Saturday morning, nearly 2 months after graduation. I hadn't been sleeping well, so I was already awake, nursing a cup of coffee and staring blankly at the TV. I opened the door to find Thomas Jackson standing there. It took me a moment to place him. He'd graduated from Oak Ridge 3 years earlier. I'd been his counselor during a particularly difficult time in his life. "Mrs. Carter," he said with a hesitant smile, "I hope it's okay that I stopped by. I got your address from Mrs. Davis at school." I blinked in surprise but stepped back to let him in. "Of course, Thomas. Is everything all right?" He looked around the apartment as he entered, and I saw it through his eyes. The unwashed dishes in the sink mail piled on the counter. The general air of neglect that had settled over my home as depression took hold. "I'm actually doing really well," Thomas said, seemingly oblivious to the state of my home. "I just finished my junior year at State. Pre-med track." I managed a genuine smile at that. "That's wonderful. I remember when you were convinced you wouldn't even graduate high school." Thomas nodded solemnly. "That's actually why I'm here. Mrs. Davis told me about what happened with Allison at graduation." My smile disappeared. "I see." "No, I don't think you do," Thomas said earnestly. "When she told me, all I could think about was that day in your office senior year. Do you remember it?" I had counseled hundreds of students over the years, but I did remember. Thomas had come to school with visible bruises, and when I gently questioned him, the whole story came pouring out. His father's alcoholism, the escalating abuse, his plan to drop out and disappear. "You stayed late that day," Thomas continued. "You called social services. You helped me find a place to stay with my aunt. You checked on me every single day for the rest of that year." His voice grew thick with emotion. "Mrs. Carter, you saved my life. Not just my education, my actual life. And I know I'm not the only one." I sat heavily on the couch, Thomas's words washing over me. "When Mrs. Davis told me what Allison said, how she treated you, I couldn't believe it. I had to come tell you that she's wrong. You're an amazing mother. Maybe not to her since she can't see it, but to so many of us at Oak Ridge who needed someone to care." Tears spilled down my cheeks. For weeks, I'd been defining my entire life's worth through Allison's rejection. I'd forgotten all the other lives I'd touched. Thomas stayed for almost 2 hours. He told me about his classes, his girlfriend, his plans for medical school. Before he left, he hugged me tightly. "Don't let her take away who you are," he whispered. "We need you." After Thomas left, I stood in my living room for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I opened the curtains. Sunlight streamed in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I spent the rest of the day cleaning. Not just straightening up, but deep cleaning. Scrubbing floors, washing windows, doing laundry that had piled up. It was a small act of reclaiming my space, my life. The following Monday, I called a therapist, whose name Jennifer had given me weeks earlier. The first session was brutal. I cried more than I talked, but I made another appointment for the next week. Through Jennifer, I also learned about a support group for parents estranged from their adult children. The first meeting I attended was eye-opening. There was Diane, whose son hadn't spoken to her in 8 years. Michael, whose daughters had cut contact after his divorce. Eleanor, whose twins had been turned against her by their father. Their stories didn't minimize my pain, but they helped me see that I wasn't alone. That sometimes, despite our best efforts, relationships with our children can fracture. The hardest part, Diane told me after one meeting, is letting go of the fantasy. We all have this idea of what our relationship with our children should be. When reality doesn't match that fantasy, we blame ourselves. Her words resonated deeply. I had spent 18 years building a fantasy of the close relationship Allison and I would have as she grew into adulthood. I had never considered that she might not want that same relationship. With my therapist's encouragement, I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been set aside when I became a mother at 19. I had always loved art, but hadn't picked up a paintbrush since before Allison was born. I bought a small watercolor set and started painting on weekends. The biggest step came when I enrolled in online classes to finish my bachelor's degree. With Allison gone, the money I'd been saving for her state school expenses could go toward my own education. It felt both liberating and terrifying to invest in myself this way. Cleaning out Allison's room was another milestone. For months, I'd left it untouched, as if she might return any day. With help from Diane, I sorted through everything. Clothes and personal items went into boxes for when or if Allison wanted them. The rest I donated or repurposed. Among her belongings, I found a photo album I'd made for her 16th birthday. It chronicled our life together: baby pictures, first steps, school plays, camping trips. I sat on her stripped bed and flipped through it, tears flowing freely. So many happy moments captured. Had they all been a lie, or had something changed along the way? I didn't have answers, but I was slowly making peace with the possibility that I might never get them. That reconciliation might never happen. The realization was painful, but also strangely freeing. 6 months after graduation, I barely recognized my life. My apartment had been transformed. Allison's room was now my art studio and study space. I'd painted the walls a soothing sage green and filled the shelves with books about art psychology and history instead of teenage novels and school yearbooks. My progress in therapy had been significant. I still had bad days. Still cried sometimes when I saw mothers and daughters shopping together, still felt the ache of Allison's absence. But I was no longer defined by her rejection. My online classes were going well. I had reconnected with old friends and made new ones through my support group. Jennifer and I had become closer, often meeting for coffee or dinner on weekends. The unexpected revelation came through Madison Allison's former roommate from debate camp. She stopped by the school one day to pick up a letter of recommendation from her old debate coach and saw me in the hallway. "Mrs. Carter," she called, waving enthusiastically. "How are you? How's Allison doing at Yale?" So Yale hadn't been a lie, at least. "She's doing well as far as I know," I said carefully. "We don't talk much these days." Madison's expression grew uncomfortable. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. She, she mentioned some tension, but I didn't realize." "It's okay," I assured her. "These things happen. How's state treating you?" "It's good," Madison said. Then hesitated. "Mrs. Carter, I don't know if I should say anything, but there's something you should probably know." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "The Grants," Madison said quietly. "Allison was staying with them after graduation, right? Jessica told me they asked her to leave about a month ago. Apparently they caught her in several lies. She'd been telling people they were paying her full tuition at Yale, but they were only helping with books. And she'd been taking things from their house and selling them online. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but it did." "Do you know where she's staying now?" Madison shook her head. "Jessica said she's bouncing between friends at Yale. Listen, I've got to run, but..." She touched my arm gently. Alison always talked about how controlling and unfair you were, but the few times I came over, you were always super nice. I should have questioned her stories more. After Madison left, I sat in my office processing this new information. The Grants had seen through Alison's manipulation, just as I had failed to do for 18 years. In a strange way, it was validating. The most disturbing revelation came a week later. In a therapy session, I mentioned Madison's visit, which led to my therapist encouraging me to look at Alison's social media, something I'd avoided doing. With my therapist's support, I created a new account and searched for Alison. What I found left me breathless with shock. In multiple posts, Alison referred to being raised by a single father. In one photo caption, she wrote, "Missing my dad today. Wish he could see me thriving at Yale." My daughter was telling people I was dead. The discovery should have destroyed me, but somehow it had the opposite effect. The sheer audacity of the lie, the complete erasure of my existence, was so extreme that it finally broke through my lingering guilt. This wasn't about my failings as a mother. This was about Alison's pathological need to reinvent herself, regardless of who she hurt. I decided to address the situation directly but strategically. I didn't confront Alison. That would only feed into her narrative of me as controlling. Instead, I wrote a calm, factual letter to the Grants. I explained that I had learned about their situation with Alison and wanted to apologize for my behavior at the grocery store. I briefly outlined the truth of our life together, not to garner sympathy, but to set the record straight. I thanked them for looking out for Alison, even though it hadn't ended well. I didn't expect a response, so I was surprised when a handwritten note arrived from Harold Grant 2 weeks later. He expressed regret for his family's role in the situation, admitting they had been captivated by Alison's intelligence and charm and had failed to question her stories about her home life. He apologized for not reaching out to me directly before allowing Alison to stay with them. The most validating part came at the end. We've come to realize that Alison's account of her upbringing was largely fictional. While we still care about her future, we cannot condone her dishonesty or her treatment of you. Please know that our door is open if you ever wish to talk. I never took him up on the offer, but the note itself was healing. Someone else had seen through Alison's manipulation. I wasn't crazy. The final test came just before Christmas, when Alison texted me out of the blue. "Need money for textbooks next semester. Can you send $800? No greeting, no acknowledgement of the months of silence, just a demand." In the past, I would have emptied my savings account to help her, desperate to stay connected in any way. This time I took a deep breath and wrote back, "I'm not comfortable sending money without more information. We need to have a real conversation first." Her response was immediate and harsh. "Forget it. I'll ask Dad." The fictional father, presumably. I didn't respond. That evening I sat in my newly decorated living room, fairy lights twinkling on my small Christmas tree, a cup of tea in my hands. I had expected to feel devastated by the exchange, but instead I felt something unexpected: pride. I had set a boundary. I had refused to be manipulated. It was a small victory, but it was mine. 1 year after graduation day, I stood on a different stage in a different cap and gown. At 58, I was considerably older than most of my fellow graduates. But as I accepted my bachelor's degree in psychology, age seemed irrelevant. Jennifer and several colleagues cheered from the audience. My support group friends had come with homemade signs. Even Thomas had driven 3 hours to be there, bringing his girlfriend and a bouquet of sunflowers. I had done it. Nearly 40 years after dropping out of college to raise Alison, I had completed my degree. The achievement was bittersweet. I had always imagined Alison would be there to see it. But it was no less meaningful. With my degree, new opportunities opened up. I was offered a position as head counselor at Oak Ridge with a significant pay increase. I also started leading workshops for single parents at the community centre, sharing both professional knowledge and personal experience. Through these workshops, I met Gina, a young single mother struggling to raise twin boys while working full-time. She reminded me so much of myself at that age, determined, exhausted, sometimes overwhelmed, but never giving up. I became her mentor, helping her navigate childcare challenges and educational opportunities. "I don't know how to thank you," Gina told me after I helped her secure a scholarship to complete her associate's degree. "You've changed our lives. Just pay it forward someday." I told her and meant it. As for Alison, our relationship remained complicated. After my refusal to send money, she didn't contact me for months. Then shortly after my graduation, a letter arrived. It was 3 pages of what appeared to be apology, but reading between the lines, I recognized the manipulation. She wrote about misunderstandings and mutual mistakes, carefully avoiding taking full responsibility for her actions. The letter ended with another request for financial help this time, for summer housing. My response was measured. I acknowledged her letter and expressed hope that someday we might rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect. I gently explained that I wasn't in a position to provide financial support, but that I would always be available to talk if she wanted a genuine connection. She never replied. Some days, the pain of her absence still hits me unexpectedly. I'll see a young woman with similar blonde hair in the grocery store, or hear a laugh that sounds like hers used to, and grief will wash over me anew. But these moments pass more quickly now, no longer defining my days. The greatest lesson I've learned is that my worth was never dependent on Alison's approval. For too long, I measured my success as a person solely through my role as her mother. When she rejected that role, I felt I had failed completely. Now I understand that while being Alison's mother is part of my identity, it isn't the whole of who I am. I'm also a counselor who has helped hundreds of students, a friend, an artist, a mentor, a woman with her own dreams and ambitions. I don't know what the future holds for Alison and me. Perhaps someday she'll mature enough to see beyond her own desires and recognize the love that was always there. Perhaps not. I've made peace with both possibilities. What I do know is that I'm no longer waiting for her validation to live my life. Every day is an opportunity to help someone to create something beautiful, to grow in some small way. That's enough. I am enough. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you loved unconditionally? How did you find your way back to self-worth? Please share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the family we build isn't the one we expected, but it can be just as meaningful. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey of healing and self-discovery.